And of course, I would like to invite Mr. Ablaza to take a seat right in the center of the panel, which we are moving into right now. Lots of great pertinent points and of course two power-packed presentations to set the stage for our panel discussion, which is titled Building Resilient Industries Adapting to Climate Change Through Energy Efficiency and Decarbonization for All. Once again, if you'd like to post a question, you may use the Q&A function in the ACES app. It is my pleasure now to invite the panelists on stage. Let's first of all welcome back Dr. Deven Chhaya, Partner, Infrastructure Advisory, KPMG. And joining him on stage is Dr. Priyantha Wijayatunga, Senior Director, Energy Sector Office, Sectors Group, Asian Development Bank. We also have Prof. Lok Kai Sang, Head, Energy Efficiency Technology Center, Singapore Institute of Technology. And of course, our moderator for this session is Dr. Poon Chun, Head, Climate Change and Sustainability, National Climate Change Secretariat, Prime Minister's Office Strategy Group. And without further ado, I'd like to hand the time over to Dr. Poon Chun, please.
Yeah, welcome everyone to ACES 2024 and for our first panel discussion of the afternoon, which is on building resilient industry, adapting to climate change through energy efficiency and decarbonization. So my name is Chun, you can just call me KC, and I'm Head of Climate Change and Sustainability at NCCS, which is in the Prime Minister's Office Strategy Group, and I'll be your moderator for today. So today I'm joined by my esteemed panels here who are veterans in the energy efficiency space. So before we get started, I would like to invite the panelists to give a very brief, quick introduction of themselves. Yep, so perhaps we could start from Deven.
Sure. I'm Deven, part of the KPMG Infrastructure Advisory. My role is to handle the infra tech and decarbonization practice within the firm. My background has been in operations. So I started off as an electronics engineer who has always been in the electrical side. So studied low voltage but operated on high voltage. But essentially it's always been on the operation side, and digital and tech is my forte.
Hi, Alex. Well, maybe let me just complement my introduction during the presentation. I work on energy efficiency, finance and investments across 17 markets in Asia and a little bit in the Middle East. And it's just, I'm just on this mission, this big mission to grow energy efficiency, connect capital and projects so that energy efficiency does happen. Oh, policy too.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. I'm Priyantha Wijayatunga, looking after the energy sector operations across Asia Pacific region in the Asian Development Bank as the Senior Director, newly formed structure in ADB. I have been with ADB for 17 years, in fact, a few years as the Director South Asia Energy. And prior to coming to ADB, I have been a regulator back in Sri Lanka and also an academic for many, many years. So that's my background, mostly technical plus economics. So my postgraduate used to be in power system economics.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Lok Kai Sang here, professor at Singapore Institute of Technology. I'm also heading the Energy Efficiency Technology Center at SIT. EETC actually helped industry, particularly SME, to improve their energy efficiency and to decarbonize. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for that round of introductions. So I'd like to keep this panel a little bit more casual and free-flowing. So just feel free to jump on and jump in, even if the question is not directed to you. So perhaps I could get the balls rolling with a very simple question that I'd like to pose to every one of the panelists, which is what and how does your company or entity support energy efficiency measures through its efforts? Perhaps, Deven, you could.
Sure. So KPMG is involved in many of these infrastructure-led projects. Of course, energy efficiency and what am I doing on the stage, because we are an audit and accounting, but surprisingly, we do have a very large technical team. In fact, my team constitutes about 75% engineers coming from different areas of specialty. We have been working very closely on constructing models, and this is very much in line with what Ablaza mentioned, is creating effective financing models for efficiency. And these do not only restrict itself on buildings, but extend into industrial energy savings. We are also looking at alternative fuels, which essentially also reduce the load on the typical sources of energy as of now. We are, in fact, we will be launching very soon the energy efficiency platform for buildings in association with the ASEAN Center for Energy. And you would have all heard the launch of the platform that SEAS has launched yesterday. So we are very actively involved in developing the DG Leap platform, which is a marketplace to bring the various stakeholders, the project owners of energy efficiency, the financiers, and the technology providers together to source for projects, financing, and technology.
Yeah, thanks.
In the work, my advisory hat for energy efficiency, and also the several nonprofits, the Philippine Energy Efficiency Alliance, the Asia Pacific ESCO Industry Alliance, the Global ESCO Network, Mission Efficiency. It's all about increasing knowledge across sectors. It's all about removing persistent barriers. It's all about policy reform. We're in the PE2 hat. You know, we had an energy efficiency bill sitting in Congress for 29 years. It's making sure that, you know, all the stars are aligned and we educate the lawmakers so they understand the economic impacts of energy efficiency, market transformation. So somehow civil society has to fill the gap where the executive branch of government was not filling. It also provides continuity regardless of political changes in government. Civil society should continue that momentum of the market transformation. So that's where, and then Climergy, of course, it's to address that market failure where my finding across Asia, across India, across China, across most of Southeast Asia, and even across most of ESCOs in a mature market such as Singapore, it's 98% of ESCOs across Asia, developed or developing markets, have very poor access to commercial lending. So it's only the 2% that are either large multinationals or state-owned, such as the state-owned ESCOs in China, for example, that have access, more access or suitable access. So the typical ESCO in China could only borrow, or typical ESCO in Southeast Asia, for example, would max out its credit limit after 3 or 4 project loans. And that's it. No, it doesn't have the financial statement. So we in Climergy are solving that by making sure that we flow not debt finance on their balance sheet, but investing equity capital outside the balance sheet of ESCOs. So that's what Climergy does.
I don't think you need any introduction about Asian Development Bank's operations. And Asian Development Bank has been probably the largest lender, multilateral development bank in Asia Pacific region. Yeah, if you look at particularly energy sector operations, we lend roughly about last year I think about $25 billion, out of which a substantial component is on infrastructure. And in the past, it has been roughly about 20% in the energy sector. We used to lend roughly about $4 to $5 billion a year in energy sector. And this year, very likely, we will get back to $5 billion mark. After the pandemic, there was a dip. And hopefully, we will get it back, ramp it up to about $6.5 to $7 billion a year with the capital adequacy framework revised recently. We have more headroom and so on. So overall, we are looking at a larger volume of lending. And obviously, clean energy lending has been our main area of lending as far as energy sector is concerned. Of course, this does not mean it is on energy efficiency or generation in clean energy generation, but also supporting infrastructure. Half of our lending has been frankly in network services, transmission and distribution, which supports clean energy development, also supply side energy efficiency and so on. So this has been always our area of focus right throughout. Going forward, we are doing a lot in this area. Of course, Alex, talked about a lot about the barriers we have in energy efficiency, and we have not been doing much on the demand side. I must confess that we have been almost neglecting demand side energy efficiency or end-use energy efficiency. That's something which we are trying to concentrate as a special initiative, particularly on hard-to-abate sectors like steel, cement, and even long-distance transport. So these are areas we are trying to focus on, and hopefully we will do a better job of it as we move on in the energy efficiency scene. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. For us at the Energy Efficiency Technology Center, we are very much committed to the demand side of energy efficiency. And we also we are quite humble. We have a small organization set up with funding from our agency, NEA. We're working in collaboration with the agency to help our local SME to decarbonize, to really look at the fundamental of energy efficiency, looking at the plant, facility, system, and equipment. We conduct energy audit, bring equipment along to analyze the energy profile and identify energy saving opportunity. So this is a very small incremental step, but then we hope that the volume of the SME, if they come forward, and they can achieve energy efficiency, energy saving, and the sort of accumulated impact could be quite substantial to decarbonize. And also, SME have their challenges. They are not looking for finance from Asia Development Bank or Super ESCO. After energy audit, we identify energy saving opportunity. We also conduct third-party assessment to help this small SME to actually apply for government incentive and grant, which are available there. Again, the sum can be quite small, tens of thousands or 100 over 1,000, not those big in terms of million, not even in the sense of Vincent, that a couple of million. But to the SME, because they don't have the capacity to do the work themselves, sometimes they cannot even fund the energy improving measure to be implemented. So I think they do need some help. They don't know how to find opportunity to save energy, so we can come in to help them. So I must say that we have been doing some good work, but then the challenge is there because, like sometimes, just now, speaker also mentioned that SMEs sometimes they don't know how to go about to find energy saving opportunity. They need knowledge from outside to help them. So sometimes the ESCO will help, and we at EETC, we are not competing with the ESCO. We only do the small project to help those who can't even afford Super ESCO and those, Okay, so those are the work we do. I think the second aspect also we are doing is to train competent manpower, because the finance are not good enough, because you need people who know how to implement the project, who can identify which are the area they can apply energy efficient technology to achieve that energy saving. So we conduct a lot of courses to help to train competent person. Thank you.
Yeah. Just to build on that particular point that you raised on SME, what do you think are the key challenges and hurdles beyond just the finance, as you mentioned, in terms of adopting energy efficiency strategies into their whole business model? How do you think that it could be, or how do you think they should work towards adoption of these kind of EE strategies?
Yeah, unfortunately, SME in Singapore, they seem to have other challenges that they are facing in terms of their business aspect, operational aspect. So on their own, sustainability, energy efficiency is not the top priority. But then once we conduct the energy audit, actually we can identify that these are the low-hanging fruit. In fact, they don't need to come up with very much capital, and they can, have the energy saving. Very often, the payback period, like just how people mentioned, that it could be just 1 or 2 years. But unfortunately, that is not their priority, and they are not aware such opportunity exists. So I think the outreach program, sharing session of this nature will go a long way to educate the owner, the SME, to embrace sustainability and energy efficiency measure, to use that as a competitive business tool as well.
Yeah, thanks for that. For Alex, in your earlier presentation, you mentioned about how a lot of financing has been going mainly into renewable energy, but I don't think that it should be in terms of a cannibalistic effect. Do you see how EE can come into play to support this renewable energy transition as well?
Well, it works both ways. Sometimes it's the rooftop solar business model that opens procurement systems of commercial and industrial end users to using the same off-balance sheet model for the replacement of their boilers, their chillers, their chiller plants, putting on district cooling, replacing compressors. So it's before there was resistance, right? And then when the rooftop solar came in, it said, if that can be done off balance sheet, then I could replace my end-use technologies also using off balance sheet. Now, typically, it's a different set of players or offerers. Before, it was the rooftop solar developers, but this time, there would be the ESCOs. So sometimes in that sense, but it's often it's not, why we say first fuel is we encourage governments, we encourage private sector end users to mobilize energy efficiency even ahead of other renewable energy and other decarbonization actions, because you don't have to build capacity for what you can shave off in the first place. So it's just raising that awareness, raising that So if an SME or a large household would start to put up rooftop solar and end up reducing its demand to 80% less than rooftop solar, in many markets, in Singapore it's easy, but in many Southeast Asian markets, they cannot export that back to the grid. So he'll be ended. You overbuilt your renewable energy capacity. So it's especially in the demand side. I think we have to continue promoting the first fuel concept, where energy efficiency is always ahead, and not the cart before the horse, and build the renewable energy capacity before shaving off what could be shaved off. And it's, again, I'd like to repeat that point. It's going to be a habitual shaving off. You do it this year, 3 years down the road, the next 3 years you continue to shave off again. So it's going to be an iterative process where you'll never stop shaving off peak demand.
If I can just add a bit more on this. It is coming to light very clearly that energy efficiency is becoming the first port of call when we start drawing up our decarbonization plans. Because most of the decarbonization plans today, we look at the whole MAC curve and realize that the maximum incentive for us to start anywhere is energy efficiency. So that realization is now coming in very, thick and fast. problem that I see, especially with SMEs, is the access to knowledge on what are the ways in which they can actually get started. I'll give you one small example. Harborcraft, for example. I'm just taking an arbitrary example here, but Harborcraft is operated generally by SMEs. They are currently running on fuel oil, or it could be running on diesel. There was this play that said, oh, LNG is the best alternative transition fuel. You all may go into LNG. So we had this whole exercise around how do you convert hovercrafts and tugs into LNG. By the time they started making those plans, somebody said, oh, Singapore is going to be big on hydrogen. You should wait for hydrogen to come in. And then they are waiting for hydrogen, and then there is a force saying, oh, you need to decarbonize, use methanol. So it's very confusing for the SME to actually decipher what exactly are the plans that they need to action on the ground. So I believe it's more to do with what they need to action now and keep in abeyance those which are technology dependent or technology evolution dependent. That really is the painstaking point which SMEs are realizing as they get into green loan applications or sustainability linked loan applications, where they have to fill up all these parameters saying, what are your green transition plans? Oh, I had a decarb pathway drawn up by a consultant, but right now it may be obsolete because the technologies identified are already not proven. So those are the challenges I feel we also need to address, mainly from a competency point of view and also from the knowledge that needs to come in from evolved technologies, that these are workable, these are in progress. Give it a few years, it may come to fruition.
Thanks for that. I think it's interesting that a lot of these E measures are still very technology-based, and that we are really relying on the next development of these new technologies to help support these kind of energy transition and energy efficiency in general. Perhaps taking a step back in terms of what more do you think can be done to support this kind of energy efficiency, perhaps maybe from a finance perspective, Priyantha?
Yeah, going back a little bit actually on this, I mean, what I find in the countries where we work, one of the biggest issues, I'm sure Alex presented that in his presentation, the absence of the proper institutional mechanisms in these countries or the institutions to do this and take ownership of this, both in the sovereign space or both in the public sector as well as in the private sector. We have successful energy efficiency demand side, end-use energy efficiency programs where we have such institutional structures in place. For example, if you take India, India has this super ESCO created by the government called Energy Efficiency Services Limited, which has taken the responsibility of improving energy efficiency in public institutions wherever public space needs some energy efficiency. So that is something which is very much important in the presence of related institutions. The second is, of course, along with it, the financing institutions. One of the biggest problems which I see is that the awareness and the capacity of the financing institutions to lend to energy efficiency related interventions. So they don't have in-house capacity, and from that viewpoint, actually, the multilateral banks like us has a big responsibility to improve their capacity or support capacity in some form or the other for them to. Now, one good example is, for instance, we did so well in India, but we are trying hard to do something in Bangladesh, but we don't have an institution to work with because such strong institutional structure is not available. And you can do a lot in the textile industry or in the fertilizer industry in Bangladesh, but we don't have space because the institutional structure is not present. And so these are major issues we have. And as a result, obviously, the financing, whatever limited financing we have, shifted to renewable energy rather than energy efficiency. This is exactly what Alex was talking about. Yep. And the awareness of the recipients also. probably the emphasis they put in energy efficiency related investments is less than putting in on renewable energy. And because they have to replace things, keep that in mind. If a particular piece of equipment is at its end of its economic life, then and it's a time to replace, then they may go for the best energy efficient piece of equipment. But they wouldn't like to replace it in between. Even though it's economically and financially viable, they may not like to do that because that's part of their process. So the thinking you have behind this. If somebody else comes and replace it and work on the financing side, then that would be okay. But you don't do it yourself. These are some of the issues you have as against renewable. Renewable energy is always an addition, and there are other attractive financing benefits, financial benefits you reap because of the feed-in tariffs and everything else. Whereas energy efficiency, you don't have that. So these are some of the issues we find we need to address as we move on if you are looking at financing. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So moving on to some questions from the audience. What are some key advice would you have for companies who are struggling to adopt decarbonization strategies? Any guidelines that they can follow? Yeah. Perhaps, Prof, you might want to take this in terms of...
What sort of guidelines?
Sorry. What are the key advice you have for like companies, like SMEs, in terms of adopting this kind of EE technologies or decarbonization technologies in general? What advice would you have for them?
Yeah, I think my advice, like some of the advice given earlier, energy efficiency is a real thing. It can help to achieve energy saving and reduce operating costs. And it is the low-hanging fruit, ready to be plucked. Don't go and build scaffolding, take ladder to look at those, those fruit at the top of the tree. It may look appealing, look sexy, but then you forget that there's so much low-hanging fruit to be plucked. And my message is real thing that can help them to save energy and decarbonize the operation. If they need help in Singapore context, they can approach the ESCO in Singapore, or they can come to EETC. We offer very actually low-cost energy audit because we are supported by agency to help SME in particular. You have to try it out, and then you can really feel the sort of outcome, the real energy saving aspect. I think my message is that it's a real energy saving measure based on energy efficiency technology.
Yep, thanks for that. I think this particular question is quite interesting in terms of financing of EE projects. So they were asking how important is the measurement of these kind of energy performance in the identification and implementation and financing of these EE projects? Perhaps, Priyantha, you want to take a step at this?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, when it comes to financing, unless you know exactly where to put the money, it's not going to be the optimal solution. So measurement and monitoring is very important. You put in money where the returns are the best, obviously. So that's something which is very important for a financing institution. I mean, my message to most of the SMEs is that, or rather to the government, you have to have carrot and stick. You have to have incentives at the same time. You have to have certain level of regulations brought in. Otherwise, it wouldn't happen. Because without incentives, of course, nobody will put in money. And that's what has happened to the renewable energy sector. You have so much of incentives all over, and people basically invest in it, whereas energy efficiency is a different story. And then, of course, at the same time, you should have some regulations. Otherwise, you will not be able to force them into, energy efficiency for the simple reason you have to replace things. You are not really replacing it at the end of its life, but somewhere in between. Then it's difficult to make up your mind. Why should you do this? I mean, I might pay a little bit more. That's okay. I can live with it rather than trying to spend more capital now for an equipment which can last for another 10 years. Why should I do it? That's the thinking you have in the system. So that's something which we need to really carefully look at. And from our side, our task is to help the public sector, in the governments, to bring in these policies and regulations so that you can have a carrot and stick kind of approach to ensure that these SMEs will go into an energy efficient mode. Otherwise, nothing will happen.
Yeah, Chairman, allow me to chip in. Now, about this data center sustainability, I totally agree that we need to have this stick and carrot approach because I think even locally, we set very achievable target. For example, PUE 1.6. I know that some of the ESCO, Vincent is smiling and said, "Oh, technically, we can achieve much better than PUE 1.6, certainly." I mean, technology is there, but sometimes for data center owner or the designer, because the stick is not there to ensure that you need to have a better efficiency utilization, or perhaps the carrot is not there to provide additional incentive. But in terms of technology, engineers and technologies, ICT engineer, we can actually deploy technology to achieve very high energy efficiency for data center. You need that policy approach. You need that as incentive as well. Thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just like to weave the data center. Data center is just a new load. So what worries me in data center is there would be, the smarter the technology, the smarter the ICT, the more heat. And then the more heat it emits, the more cooling. So can our cooling technologies just catch up with the rate that the ICT technologies are evolving? So this is something, and you'll be stuck with the stranded assets. It's come to the point where even if you achieve way better than PUEs of 1.6, I see data center developers abandoning existing buildings because they are not convinced that it could be retrofitted with the right rack cooling and space cooling that would be needed. But I agree with Priyantha, it's carrot and stick. And Singapore has done a fantastic job with the carrot, but is it whacking a big stick? There was a point when the Philippine government was convinced that no matter what fiscal incentives I dangle, energy efficiency is still happening at a very slow pace. But it's once the law was updated, there was now 5-year imprisonment and $2 million USD fines, and then that's the time that you get people. In just last December, they brought down the threshold to 50,000 kilowatt hours, and that's a micro business. That's no longer the corporate. It went down to down market. It's now going to the small businesses. That's a 300 square meter daytime air-conditioned office. So any business of that size and larger is now going to be regulated on energy use. So in the Philippine case, they're dangling small carrots, but they're whacking a big stick. And that's the way. Because energy efficiency won't happen because of behavioral inertia. In mind that everybody agrees in the room, everybody agrees in the economy that it's got to be done. But, have you really done it in your household? There's something that you might have an appliance or something that's still there. So sometimes you just have to whack the bigger stick. And it's going to be a combination of carrot and stick still, but sometimes you may need the stick to make it happen finally.
So can you indulge me for a minute? How many of us have, before the Uber and Grab eras, the yellow and the blue cabs, how many of us have been in that era? All of us?
All of us.
Yeah. Well, the driver had absolutely no control. Maintenance, ownership, everything was taxi companies. The passenger, the usage was entirely on the passengers. The driver was the one with all the sticks and no carrots. Data centers, if I can put that analogy in, is moving towards that regime where the loads, the heat loads, not the energy loads, heat loads are defined by the processing that the various tenants are making. The energy consumption and the PUE targets are given and measured and monitored, and there's a huge slap if I don't adhere to that, which is a policy direction. Where does the data center go? So unless there is a real effort in making our operational loads, the actual payloads, reduce the requirement of heating or reduce the processing and reduce the heat loads that are generated, we will have to play this catch-up of cooling. Of late, we have seen with AI coming in, the efficiencies of processing have even further fallen. So you have the heat loads actually going up multifolds, and you don't have technologies to keep up with the cooling. So it's a complete catch-up that the data centers are making. But where do they go? Where are the carrots is what the data centers are really asking. Dangling the carrots, we have even forgotten about dangling them. So that's my other take on the data center area.
Yeah, we just discussed during lunchtime, right? And if you try to search something in Google, now you get an answer for which there must be a lot of work behind the scenes and a lot of heat generated, and an answer which I don't need. I don't look for that answer. It's inadvertently. It works on it, and it gives me a paragraph which I don't need because I know the answer. What I want to know is something very small, very short, but it works on that answer. And
that's wasting energy.
Lot of waste in energy, which I didn't. For something which I didn't ask for.
Exactly.
That's what it is. Actually, I can find lots of analogies in this so-called automation. Obviously, I'm an engineer myself. I love automation, but a lot of automation done in day-to-day life obviously wastes a lot of energy. I go to the washroom, I wash my hands, and it will take a while for the tap to stop, sending water out. When those days I used to switch, close the tap as soon as I finish my work. But now it takes 1 or 2 minutes, just water running. That's energy, that's water.
Well, exactly.
That's a big problem. It's the same story when it comes to switching off, switching on of lights. So, some of the automation, without our knowledge is really wasting energy, I must tell you.
And then they say, my DC friends tell me that every time you post a picture or every time AI works, the redundancy, it's sitting in 3 servers around the world. Every megabyte of that is sitting in 3 data centers. So it's not emitting heat and requiring cooling in just one spot, but in 3 parts of the world. So you can imagine that. So every redundant photo or question that you ask through AI, it's just creating a lot of redundant emissions everywhere.
Yep. Thanks for that. I think it's important for us to not just be focused on the solution, but also the demand of things. If I'm hearing it correctly, that the demand is also as important, and addressing that particular demand optimization is as important as implementing cooling strategies or EE at the supply end. Yep. I think this was a very interesting question. I'm not sure if the panelists have heard of Jevons paradox before. So it's a paradox where even as we improve EE, society actually moves in terms of consuming more of energy instead of reducing your usage. So what does the panel think about this? But Deven, you seem to have a lot of insights about this. Yep.
I completely agree with this paradox, because what is happening in the energy space, and that's why in my opening I did go into this, that the step that we need to take as humans, as people, is much bigger for all of us than the impact that it's going to make outside. So can I, as a conscious citizen, actually sign a PPA? And this is something which is going to come. In the next 10 years or so, we should be expecting an agreement from our retailers saying we can switch off the power whenever we want. Are you ready for it? When you're watching too much of Netflix, the data center will be able to control that and say you're not watching it because you have exceeded your data center load, and no more Netflix for you. Are we ready for such areas? The more we try to save, the more, and that's where the cooling, How do you play catch up with energy efficiency? The only answer is a conscious awareness that is created through continuous learning and continuous, I would say, bombardment of information that this is something which is wrong for the planet. All of us, I would love to see next SIEW being done in an environment we shed our jackets. We increase the temperature to 26 degrees and shell the jackets. Let's be informal. Batik is one of our region's best dress. Why can't we adopt that? So these are the changes that are required. Unfortunately, we need to make those changes ourselves. And that's why I completely agree that the more we try to save, the more we are going to actually consume, because we have got more, because generation plants need to run. Whether it's fossil, renewable, I really don't want to go into that, but essentially they are still producing, so they need to sell the energy somewhere. And that is going to go either into your habits, which is data centers, or it's going to go into your lifestyle, which is cooling.
Yeah, no, I hear you that these kinds of behavioral and societal changes need to take place to support the energy efficiency transition as well. Yeah. I think there's one a bit more contentious topic, which is on greenwashing. So, so I think the question was, with the now prevalence of a lot of greenwashing cases being shown, that a lot of projects are technically not green in nature. What can we do to ensure that even for EE projects, that this does not happen? Yeah, perhaps Alex, you want to start?
Well, it's really regulating end use of energy. It's even for the large corporates, even for large commercial or industry. If the regulator would just be more granular, then it can't be superficial energy efficiency. It can't be greenwashing. It's got to be real results-based removal of energy consumption or improvement of energy intensity of any commercial activity. So it's really regulation that's going to be the first. And I think the financiers and investors will also ensure that because they're looking at emissions and energy reductions. In my case, Climergy, we can take greenwash projects because we really have to see our revenue streams are from actual measured and verified energy savings. So if we don't get that, then we don't get our money back, right? So it's really about I think the change in business model, such as off-balance sheet modalities, getting third parties. There's a I can't mention a name because of confidentiality, but there's a major property developer in the Philippines, if not the largest, that is currently divesting of all its cooling assets, whether for pipeline buildings, still in the drawing stage, or so whether it's hotels and office towers or shopping malls, they're just divesting. And then we've received requests for proposals. Climergy has received requests for proposals to buy out their HVAC assets and just enter into 15, 20-year supply contracts. And you know what? If you sell them chilled water, their behavior changes. It's just different. So if we go micro, and if we do that to SMEs, you do that to households right now, instead of selling electricity because it just doesn't work, you're talking about the paradox. There's a lot of market rebound. The World Bank was assisting the government of Mexico in a large-scale replacement of window-type air conditioners and refrigerators over a decade ago. And it worked. I think the net impact was still very largely positive. There were energy and carbon reductions, but there was some market rebound. People were using their appliances longer. So we're now using inverters, so let's use it 2 hours, 3 hours longer. So there will be this market rebound, but at the end of the day, there was still net positive. There was still a reduction. There was still the desired effect. So yes, you expect that there will be some leakages. There will be some rebound on every time you transform a market. The opposite type of behavior will come up.
Yeah, thanks for that. So we're running a bit tight on time. But before we go, perhaps I'd like the panelists to give maybe a short 1 to 2 sentence summary on what you'd like the audience to take away in terms of E and E's role in terms of supporting decarbonization. Perhaps, Deven, you could start.
The point which I couldn't sort of go into details was the strategic energy management. I think we all need to look at energy from a very strategic perspective. It is a resource which is limited, and we need to really make sense of usage. Energy efficiency, in one bottom line, is one place where you may not have to do a greenwashing, frankly. This is a place where you can really get tangible results in your pocket, so please invest in it.
Alex?
Policy, I like the chart of Deven, policy, finance, collaboration. Energy efficiency happened because all these gears are turning and in sync. And for business, for many of the industrial end users in the room, for example, have a C-level energy efficiency champion. It may be your sustainability officer, but have him in the boardroom and not in the basement. And that's where energy efficiency happens.
Yeah, Priyantha.
Yeah, I mean, as a financing institution, I must say financing is there. If you have your interest, you develop your interest and make sure that your industries really look at energy efficiency as a core part of your sector operation, the industry operations, and look for money. Money is there if you really need it, and if you think that is the right thing to do. You have to convince yourself, you change your behavior, and there is money available.
Yeah. To me, I think energy efficiency and also to prevent greenwashing, competent person is very important. The project, the assessment should be conducted by competent person so that the report, the assessment is trustworthy. Otherwise, everybody can call themselves sustainability specialist or officer, and they produce a report not based on the technical fundamental principle, and those reports can be sustainable to greenwashing. Competent person, very important.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that summary. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. So thank you once again, the panelists, for taking your time to share your insights, as well as the audience for their time and attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much to our wonderful panelists.